Kevin Kilbane, good morning to you.
Good morning, Adrian. How you doing? Good morning, Owen.
Happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas to you. Yeah, how's all over there?
Good, yeah. You've made far better effort, and I say you, we all know it's not really you, but you collectively have made a far better effort on the Christmas front than we have.
I know. You know what? The first time ever last year, I put Christmas lights up outside. Everyone makes a big effort with how they stage the houses and stuff like that here. So last year I put Christmas lights up. So when was it? 2 days ago, 3 days ago, I put the Christmas lights up outside just before the snow hit. Actually, been -8 or 9 over the last couple of nights here overnight, and I've done my bit. I'm quite happy with what I've done. Don't get me wrong. I'm not great, but I try anyway.
I did a bit of it as well this year, I have to say. Get you right in the spirit. So look, we've lots to catch up. We wanted to have a chat with you, a bit about Everton, a bit about Seamus Coleman particularly, and then it turned out you have some experience dealing with the new Manchester United assistant coach as well. So we might have a bit of a chat about that as well. But the Coleman bit particularly, Kev, caught our eye during the week with a thread from a Liverpool fan. And we thought maybe it was a good time off the back of that to do almost like a Seamus Coleman appreciation. Not that he's going anywhere anytime soon, but we don't speak about him maybe often enough. And it's been an interesting few weeks for him, so we kind of thought it was appropriate. There was lots of talk from the thread from that Everton fan. As I said, it was an appreciation thread, but it made the comparison between himself and Leighton Baines, the regard that Baines is held at Everton and that Coleman wasn't held in the same esteem. And it kind of took me back around a little bit. I know that you're not around the club as much, obviously, as you would have been before, but interested to get your own thoughts or your sense of how Seamus Coleman is held with the fans at Everton.
Well, I think, first of all, within the club, and certainly from his peers and the staff around the club, it goes without saying how well respected he is. I still speak to one or two members of staff there, and they, hold him in such high regard just for the person that he is, genuinely. And that's the kind of guy that I would have known when he first came into the Ireland squad, and the player that he's grown into, but more the leader that he's grown into over the years, because he's had a number of setbacks. I think openly he spoke. I remember speaking to him. I did an interview with him probably 4, 5, maybe even 6 years ago now. And he spoke about when he went into Everton and technically how so far advanced even the youth team were ahead of him. And he felt as though he was way out of his depth when he was training with these players. But he kept finding a way to get better than them. He had the mentality to become better than a lot of the players day to day, even a lot of the players that were younger than him when he first signed from Sligo. So he found a way, and then he had that great move to Blackpool, that loan move that he had in getting promoted with them, and then he broke into the Everton team permanently after that. And I think, when you watch him, I think as a technical fullback, I'm talking about his passing ability. He certainly wouldn't be anywhere near the very best of fullbacks that you would see with his ability on, picking a pass. If I'm looking about some of the Irish fullbacks that I would have played alongside over the years, someone like Stephen Carr and maybe even Stephen Finnan, technically he wouldn't be probably at their level. But he found a way to, I feel, to get the best out of himself. And then he had that raw pace, that raw energy that nobody could live with, his ability to get up and down the pitch to make sure that he would always be better than the man that he was going to be coming up against. So I think it's always the way with players when they get to a certain age that people forget very quickly about what you've done through your career, and maybe that 5 or 6 years, maybe between 22, I think it would have been 23 to 28, when he was on the verge of a move. I think we all accept that he was on the verge of a move to Everton, perhaps even Arsenal. I think we're sniffing when Arsenal were maybe
Man United. Was it?
Sorry,
Manchester United. I think was it the
yeah, United. But I think Arsenal were very keen for a long time, Owen, as well on him. So he was on the verge of a move to a number of clubs. And of course, then that leg break when we were in the Aviva that evening, that was a setback for him. But how he's come back from that shows a test of character that he actually is. So personally, I think to ever criticise Seamus and give him, and maybe Everton fans, if they are giving him criticism, which then again, I'm not really aware of any criticism from the fans, but every Everton fan that I've ever spoke to over the years fully appreciates what he's given the club, certainly for the, value for money. Probably over the last 15 years, 20 years, I don't think there's been a player that's given more value for money than Seamus Coleman. If you look at maybe, N'Golo Kante and Riyad Mahrez for what Leicester did with those players and the sell-on fees, But Seamus Coleman is comparable with them for value for money for what he's given Everton over the years. Yeah.
I'm not sure, did the Damari Gray interview make it onto your feed, or did he catch it at all on Monday when he got man of the match? I presume it was, because he was interviewed on Sky Sports, but Seamus Coleman was interviewed alongside him, and there was just kind of like a few lines in it which told us, people who've never been on the Everton training ground, a lot about Seamus Coleman as a leader in the training ground, kind of referring to Damari Gray's work ethic, just kind of a little bit of a tone about the fact that, you know, you got your goal tonight because you worked hard on the training ground this week. Perhaps you haven't always worked that hard, but you're getting your due awards. That sort of motivational character that he is on the training ground, a bit of a hard ass, I assume, on the training ground. I'm sure you've heard yourself, Kev, what that's like. I'm sure you've seen yourself firsthand what exactly he is like on the training ground.
Yeah, well, when he first came into the Ireland squad, like I'd have been the same myself. You've got to find your feet over a period of time, and he was a quiet lad when he came in, pretty much the same as I was. I mean, not many people would say that I'm a quiet lad now. I mean, Adrian himself there would call me a gobshite on many occasions. But anyway, I think you've got to find your feet, and I think he did that. And I think that would maybe go back to something that he said, what I was saying before about his maybe ability on the training ground. I think he felt maybe within himself he was a little bit substandard technically, and he had to find a way. So I think how he found his feet was maybe within his voice, again, with the energy that he brought to training sessions. Then he started to rub off on other players with the attitude that he started to bring. And I never really got his peak years. You know, I'd retired at that stage when he really started to establish himself. But I was still very, very, I had close contact with a lot of people at Everton around that time when he was really starting to break through. And the message was his attitude. It stood out. You know, I think you're not going to make it as a player. You never would have made it as a player at any stage, really. Even maybe before my time, you never would have made it unless you've got an attitude or something about you. And Seamus clearly has brought that attitude, that work ethic, and that ability. I think we overlook his ability. Don't get me wrong. I'm talking about his technical ability before. I think that has improved no end over the course of his career, being around better players. I think the players that Everton have brought in have certainly brought him on. And he spoke as well, Seamus, about the influence of Tony Hibbert on him as well, because Seamus, when he first broke in at Everton and when he was playing at Blackpool, he was just a marauding player. He played a lot of the time as a right winger. I don't think David Moyes could trust him as a defensive player at times as well. And he relied on Tony Hibbert, or watched Tony Hibbert, who was just a steady Eddie fullback, sat in, knew his position and played the role well. And Seamus maybe adapted that type of game or that type of style to his game, and obviously his work ethic and the energy that he's got and his real forward running and those bursts that he got, that probably, I think he maybe brought the fullback role on a little bit as well with how he was playing for a number of years. And it was no exaggeration for me to say that you could quite conceivably have put him for about 3 seasons as the best right back in the Premier League. You could have easily done that. And you might have had arguments with people about other players, but he certainly would have been in the argument for 3 or 4 seasons as the Premier League best fullback. Absolutely would have been.
Yeah. Moyes had said about him at the time that he was, he wasn't sure about his defensive thing, but he was such a positive player and he liked to get forward. Is there almost like, with that comment in mind, Kev, like he's only gone 33 and you assume that, you know, you're over the brow of the hill at that point, still some road to go, but you're over the brow of the hill. And in terms of that defensive bit of his game, how do you evaluate that? Because it might be something that he might need to get a bit more, you know, if he's to have a tail in his career, then that might be something he actually needs to rely on a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously played as the right side of a 3 centre half as well. I think his maturity, that always comes on. I remember even when I was as an attacking type player going to fullback. I say a type player, don't get me wrong. But when I went to fullback, it was totally different to me. At least Seamus has had the experience of playing there for long spells. And when he's maybe alongside Michael Keane, who plays on the inside of him, that little relationship that they've got, and the understanding of positions, don't get too far away, you know, yardage between the guy that's on your inside, between the guy that's ahead of you. Rafa Benitez likes to play a little bit more conservative football. I think we know that. So the fullbacks, from what I've seen of Everton this season, even Luca Digne on the left-hand side getting forward has not had as much influence getting forward with his crosses, with maybe final third entries. Seamus Coleman absolutely isn't the player that he was 3 or 4 seasons ago. I think that's fair to say as well. So, and maybe under Benitez, he's the kind of manager that can have him tucked in as a fullback, know your role, know your position, back up rather than continuously running beyond. That is something that I think he's learned. I think his defensive side of his game, I think it's improved no end. And I think we've seen that with Ireland, especially when he's played as a right side of the 3 centre halves. I think his ability to know the position, I think his game awareness has certainly improved as well over the years. And obviously his leadership in guiding other players into positions around him to help him out as well when he gets in trouble, or if he's seeing trouble, I think that's improved no end as well. So there's a number of things around Seamus's game that's improved beyond belief, really, considering the player that he was, that raw, energetic player of just continuously bombing forward. And you've got to develop your game. And if you don't develop your game quickly and start to bring other things on board along the way, you're not going to have a career. And you could be out of the game when you're 23, 24 from the type of player that Seamus was. And that's a testament to him, how he has adapted his game and how he's got longevity.
Is he managerial potential? Is it, like, I mean, again, that's a question that's probably loaded with, he's going to hang up the boots any day now, but that's not the case.
Yeah.
It's just some of the things that you're talking
he's
about there.
Isn't
he looks that
interview
way.
You mentioned on, he's written all over.
I didn't see it, Adrian. I didn't see it in that interview, but even seeing his interviews with Ireland over the last few years, I think he's certainly become a lot more sterner with his interviews, hasn't he? You'd maybe say less relaxed, but I think he's more observant of what he's saying. I think he knows exactly what he's saying. He knows there's a message that needs to be put out there at times. I think he's very clear and concise with his message when he's talking as well. So he's spoken about doing his coaching badges, perhaps even staying at Everton beyond his career. Everton have had Duncan Ferguson, Leon Osman, who's retired in recent seasons, who's been coaching Leighton Baines, who you mentioned earlier as well. He's been around the club. So Everton do give opportunities to former players as well, certainly ones that have done very well for the club. So it wouldn't surprise me if he did. I remember, 6 or 7 years ago, he was talking about moving back to Donegal at one stage, wasn't he? So it looks unlikely. If he's going to have a career in the game, that's, of course, very unlikely that will happen, really, yeah.
Life takes mad tangents, Kev, as we know.
It does, as we all know, exactly.
Moving to the West Coast 1 year and then suddenly before you know it. I don't like, who knows what sort of football Seamus Coleman plays, but he does strike me as actually a bit of a David Moyes type character in some ways, in that, like, there's a quiet confidence about him. He goes about his business. There's no great flash, but like, you could see him build, like, you could see him being a real players manager. You could see him easily build a very successful career in that regard.
Yeah, you know what, you talk about David Moyes, because David Moyes was my captain when I first came into Preston. I think he signed at Preston when he was 31, and he had done his coaching badges. I think he was fully qualified even when he signed as a player. He came in as our captain. I was only 16 at the time, I think, maybe even 15, 16. So I'd known him from when I was a kid, and I saw the player that the coach that he was becoming from the player. I could see that clearly, and I'm sure that there are a lot of the younger players around Everton that look up to him, that would like to have him around, that would like to see him stay beyond his playing career as well, to help establish the next generation as well. But I certainly saw that in David Moyes. So I think there's a good comparison there, Adrian. Yeah, that's it. You're quite shrewd.
That's the first for everything. Just on your point there earlier on, just about, you've totally thrown me now by giving me a compliment. This is like not what I was expecting at all. The point about, you said earlier on about him is not the player he was 3 or 4 years ago, which is fair enough, and like, there is that sort of brow of the hill aspect to it. But do you think, in terms of his future in football, like, is it possible that he, because of the influence he is around the ground, and maybe his powers are waning a small bit, but actually, no matter who's there as manager, and God knows, but as a club, that they'd want to keep him around because of that leadership bit with the younger players, that he could end up like one club, League of Ireland notwithstanding, but a one club man?
Yeah, that's true. And it looks that way. That's going to be the case as well. It depends what he would want himself. He may even decide that he might want to go and play abroad, which that is a possibility. If he wants to stay in Everton, let's be honest now, let's be fair. He isn't finished, no matter what anyone would say about him. Yes, when he made the mistake in the derby, I'm not being funny, he made the mistake in the derby, but look at the ball that was played back to him. I don't think anyone's even highlighted that. Yeah. It was a joke of a ball bouncing up round his neck. He's had to try and control it with his feet. Exactly. So let's be fair. Yes, it was a mistake, and maybe he should have done something else with it, and he would have done something else with it 99 times out of 100. But when people make mistakes and they're maybe not contributing in a way that in which they once were, then little vulnerabilities are kind of highlighted, and maybe parts of the game that has been on the wane is highlighted a lot more. But I think he's still got a lot to give. I think you can see him, as I was speaking before, his overall game has improved immensely. Leadership, yes, but he's not just there because he's a good lad. He's not just there because he's the player that you can rely on to do the job. He's there because he's a good player. Let's be fair, he's still a good player. I mean, I've spoken about him, you know, when there was talk of Matt Doherty replacing him at right back when we were playing with the back four at that time. I was having none of it because he was still our best player, and he proved that he was our best player for such a long time. And that has been proved the case now over the last maybe 10 games under Stephen Kenny with his performances. I've been so impressed with how he's played, whether he's played at wing back, whether he's played in the back three, or even whatever position he's played. Seamus Coleman has been outstanding. So when mistakes are made, we start to look, is he finished? Is he this? Is he that? Whatever. And we're always looking at the next player that's coming through. And that's just the nature of the game. We understand that. We all know the way that it works. So if he is going to go into coaching, I would like him to stay at Everton, because I think he still has got a lot to give at that club. But he's still got another couple of seasons left in him, I feel. And even if he's not going to play every week and he's not going to play 38 Premier League games a season, he could still play 15, 20 games. And even coming off the bench to see games through and contribute to that club, he could still do that easily. And that is something that's overlooked with players as well, because we're constantly thinking about the next thing. When realistically, you've got a good thing there right now. Stick with him, because he's still going to be around for a number of years, and he could still help out immeasurably with those next players that's coming through on the training ground.
Like, even from an Ireland point of view, he could be tempted. I know you're talking about like maybe move abroad, whatever it might be, or take a step down. But even from an Ireland point of view, he might be tempted to stay, because like it doesn't really matter from an Ireland point of view if he's starting or not. Like, ideally, great, but if he's playing a few games, there's still room for him in that team.
Well, as I said before, I think he is. I spoke about when Stephen Kenny named his first team and he left Seamus out, and that was a statement in itself, because the talk was there was still 50-50 whether or not Seamus Coleman deserved his starting berth. I thought it was the wrong decision to leave him out. And I said that so many times. I think it was the wrong decision. I think it was a bad call because of what he gave you and what he does give you every game. And as I said, he's proved it. He doesn't need me to say that now. He's proved how good he is in an Irish jersey, even playing a different sort of style, because we've never seen that marauding fullback that or that marauding game that he brought to Everton in an Irish jersey. Realistically, not the full Seamus Coleman, because probably restricted with the type of football that we were playing under Martin O'Neill. To an extent, I feel he wasn't. I think he felt at times that he didn't want to leave us exposed. I think when he was named captain, I think he took that added responsibility on board, that he never wanted to leave the team exposed and leave us too open. So I think that mindfulness of playing that certain way under Martin O'Neill, I think it's helped him. I think it probably will help him in the latter part of his career as well.
And also the fact that a few months later, he completely rejected a story that suggested that he had been unhappy with that decision. I mean, if there's one fella you want on your side, it's Seamus Coleman. His loyalty and his sort of way of holding up those sort of values is something that's really important to him. Yeah,
that's exactly the case, isn't it? And I'll tell you this now. I wrote a piece actually. I was doing a column, probably going back 6 or 7 years ago, easily now. I wrote a column around Roberto Martinez pulling Everton players out, and I think it was quite famous when Roy Keane actually said something about Martinez pulling Everton players out. So I wrote about Everton pulling players out, and Seamus Coleman and James McCarthy weren't involved in an Ireland game yet. I think Seamus and James, definitely Seamus was involved in the game at the weekend after the Ireland game. And I said, sometimes, the priority might be the Ireland game. And I used to feel that at times as well, that you've got to go and push a manager when you're feeling a knock or you've had a slight injury. I remember Peter Reid had conversations with him at times about making sure that I was available for that Ireland game. Regardless of anything, I had to be available for certain games. And it's not great. There's always a clash there because the club at times, the priority, because they pay you wages and you know how it is. And Seamus actually called me. Seamus called me. He was so pissed off at me because I'd wrote this piece, and I took it on board. It was, I didn't have a great relationship with Seamus in terms of, knowing him all that well, but we'd had a bond of of him coming into the squad. And I kind of respected him when he called me up, because it wasn't a criticism of him, really. It was a criticism of Martinez. And I tried to explain that to him, but he wasn't having it. He just said, my priority has always been Ireland. From when I was a kid, when I was playing underage levels, I would always make myself available to playing for Ireland. And I really respected him calling me. I did, because he could have just, blanked me when I was at Goodison, because I was still at Goodison quite a lot. But he called me up. He was man enough to call me and explain, or tell me, not really explain, just tell me that I was wrong in what I thought and what I'd written. So
he was saying that he was knocking on the door, going, "Hey, listen."
Yeah, well, he said basically he'd had a 2-week break. I think he was just starting to get that hamstring injury, or I think it was a hamstring injury that he had at the time. So Everton didn't release him to go and play for Ireland. He then played for Everton at the weekend after the midweek international games. I think it was a qualifier. I think it actually was. And I'd just written, look, sometimes players have got to realise that playing for your country is more important than anything else. And if you can play for your club side 3 or 4 days later, then you should be playing for your international side. And I understand that it's the manager that's pulling you out. And he was pissed at me anyway. He was pissed, let's just say that. And but we had a conversation, and I stood by it. I said to him, look, I stand by what I've said, but I understand what you're saying. I do understand what you're saying. But yeah, we had a nice conversation. It was good.
I'll take it on board. I can only imagine his reaction at the end of that. Thanks for the call, James. Yes, I'll take that on board for the next time. We leave it on Coleman now, but like the longevity, the captaincy, the appearances, like his over 300, nearly 350 appearances at the club, 12 years and counting, the captaincy, the leadership, the fact that he turned out the loyalty, like he's statue outside the ground material, this guy. It just to bring it full circle almost. I know it's not that he's not appreciated, I don't think, but equally not as loved as maybe he should be.
Maybe not as loved as he probably once was. I think that's fair to say, because I remember certainly when I was going to Goodison through his brilliant years, and I think it's easy to overlook how I think it's the best football I'd seen Everton play I think it was Moyes' last season there at Everton, certainly his last couple of seasons, where down the left-hand side they had Baines and Pienaar, down the right-hand side they had Morales at times, Morales was hit and miss, don't get me wrong, but Coleman was at right back, and he had players that were complementing him. The style that they were playing was so good to watch, getting into wide areas, loads of crosses that suited Coleman's game. So I don't know where I'm going there on this actually now, Adrian, but I think that
Kevin Kilbane calls for a statue of Seamus Coleman.
But I think what I was going to say was, I think it's easy to overlook how good he actually was when we're looking forward and we're saying, look, he's not the player that he once was. He's got to be replaced, because as I said before, clearly he's not the player that he was. But Everton are playing a different style now, don't get me wrong. Benitez, he's come in, he needs time to adapt, but Everton are not playing the same style that they were playing maybe under Moyes, certainly under Martinez, when Coleman was thriving under Martinez, because it was just gung-ho. It was just go and get forward, and he was scoring goals. Coleman used to see him regularly arriving on the 6-yard box at times, Coleman, from opposite crosses. So whether it was Baines or Pienaar, whoever it was crossing, it would be invariably Coleman arriving on the 6-yard box to score, or certainly to keep the ball alive. So he's done remarkable. He has, given the fee that Everton paid for him and what he's gone on to achieve. Yeah, I agree what you're saying there. If he is a one club man, I don't know how many games he's played now. He's probably over 400 games for the club. It's just been remarkable. His career has been remarkable for what he's done. Yeah, absolutely has.
I think he's about 350 or thereabouts, but headed certainly in that direction, and loved obviously over this side of the water as well. Come here, we did want to chat to you a little bit about the new appointment at United during the week. The other one, the assistant manager, former MLS midfielder, a winner with an infectious positivity was one quote that jumped out at me from The Athletic during the week. Chris Armas, and you'd have had lots of conversations with him during his, what I think was a pretty short stint, was it, at Toronto?
Yeah, he came into Toronto. He was at New York Red Bulls. He's from the Red Bull philosophy. I think everyone will be familiar with Leipzig and obviously Salzburg, but New York here, it's a pathway and a certain style of football that they like to play. So very attack minded, very high press that Rangnick is trying to adopt, that I've heard you guys talking about over the last few weeks. So there is that relationship from Red Bull, and I'm sure that's why he's bringing him in. But no, it didn't go well here when he tried to adopt that style. I mean, he had Josie Altidore over here, and I think everyone's familiar with Josie Altidore. He's trying to play a high press with Josie Altidore. You've got no chance, have you? Let's be honest. So the game in the MLS. I mean, I was having a message, or trying to message you yesterday, is designed around the designated players here. It's quite complicated how players can be bought and sold here and brought in. Players need to be moved. If you're not one of the designated players, you've got to fit into the salary cap. So the game is designed around them, and he was trying to adapt a style here at Toronto FC that didn't suit the designated players. Alejandro Pozuelo, who was at Swansea, he didn't go quite well at Swansea, but he'd be one of the main players in the MLS over the last 3 or 4 seasons. He's not really a player that likes to go and adopt a high press. Josie Altidore, as I say, everyone's familiar with him from Sunderland and Hull. I actually played with him at Hull. And these are the players that you've got to build your team around. That's what... Greg, that's what the manager before him, had in place. He had a team and a style of football that suited his designated players. Whereas Chris Armas came in at the start of last season now as it was, and he tried to adopt this style, and it just didn't work. They were a disaster. I think it was the worst defeat in the history of the franchise. The franchise has only been there for 15 years, but they lost 7 or 8-0, I think it was.
7-0 to DC United, yeah.
7-0 to DC United, that's right, and he was fired. So he didn't have a great reputation, certainly in Toronto here, but certainly within Red Bull and within their structure, he does have a good reputation for trying to adapt this sort of style that Rangnick will start to adapt over the next few weeks and months ahead of us.
Makes him an ideal fit for United, doesn't it? He's trying to put a system in place that the players aren't having.
Well, it seems a risk. It does seem risky to me, given how wrong or how horribly it went for him here in Toronto, because it didn't go well at all for him. It really didn't, and I think his reputation certainly took a huge hit here. It took a massive dent, and I think he'd have struggled to get another MLS job. I probably believe that. So for him to get the head coaching job at United, that's one of the biggest coaching jobs in the world, as we know. I think he certainly fell on his feet from the position that he was maybe 4 or 5 months ago.
Incredible. We're out of time. Really enjoyed that, and appreciation to Seamus Coleman. I think we can officially call it that.
Thanks, guys. But great to speak to you. I still listen. Yeah. I've still not forgiven either of you for certainly Owen for saying that Dublin had beat Mayo by 10 in the All Ireland semi. So I trolled him for a little bit, and he didn't take it too well.
No, I took it terribly.
I trolled you a little bit as well. You didn't take it too well, Adrian. But
I was sulking with you for a while, Kev.
Yeah, you were. You didn't like being trolled. You troll everybody else, Owen, but you don't like being trolled yourself.
Things are looking so good for Mayo for next year, Kevin. I'm sure we'll be. I'm sure it'll be all good next year.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see.
Jesus, good man. Listen, happy Christmas. Thanks, many for taking the call.
Happy Christmas to you all. Thanks very much. Cheers, lads.
Cheers.
Take care, Kev.